So we're here for the second lecture in the Higgs phenomenology in view of the beyond the standard model physics. So that's the outline. So we'll be looking at the Higgs in the fourth generation and then the MSSM. And as part of that, we'll also cover the two Higgs doublet model. Now, what we did in the first lecture is we were looking at the Higgs in terms of the standard model. Higgs gives masses to both the W and the Z and the fermions. It unitarizes the theory, and we found out that the experimental data are consistent with the standard model Higgs. And then we looked at the deviation using effective field theory. We found out that there are still order 1 errors. Now what we really want to know is what does this mean for new physics models? So the question is whether we're looking at the situation which is something like this. So that there's standard model Higgs somewhere here. We know that there's dark matter, but we're not sure what kind of a beast it is. And then there's a desert with only somewhere at the horizon quantum gravity looming. Now, it could also be that the situation is somewhat like this, so that we found the Higgs, but there's this whole structure behind us, which we will discover by looking at the properties of the Higgs. So we could be either looking at the fourth generation, MSSM, two Higgs doublet model, composite Higgs, Rundle syndrome, dark sector, and so on. So we'll start with the fourth generation. So the charge for the lecture is the following. So we'll be interested in the beyond the standard model physics impact on the Higgs properties. So the question really is, do the Higgs branching ratios and the cross-section change if there are extra states at the TeV scale? Now what I'm not going to do is, there's a very rich phenomenology which is aimed at direct searches for these beyond the standard model particles. So this is not covered in these lectures. Okay, so as I said, we'll start with the constraints on the fourth generation. So if you have the three generation standard model, you have these three copies of fermions, and now with another copy. So there's going to be a T prime, a B prime, and then the fourth generation neutrino and the lepton. And we want to know what happens with the Higgs. So there's going to be if we're looking at the Higgs to glue or the glue to Higgs, there is now extra colored states running in the loop. Now in the standard model, there is a contribution which is the dominant coming from the top, so it scales as the Yukawa coupling of the Higgs to these heavy states. However, since this is a dimension 5 operator, there is also a mass which sits downstairs. Now since the Yukawa interaction also gives you the mass of the top itself, this Yukawa dependence will cancel in the ratio. This is true also for the heavy T prime and B prime. So in effect, what we have is now we have 3 times the same contributions. The Y T prime divided by the mass of the T prime divided by the web again gives you 1, as in the standard model, plus another one from the B prime, so that you have a dominant contribution which is 3 times the standard model, and then this small correction. So in effect, this amplitude is now roughly 3 times the standard model. You square it, and you see that the cross-section for glue to Higgs, so the dominant production node for the Higgs at the LHC is enhanced about 9 times compared to the standard model. Now you also need to look at the decays. So what happens, for instance, in the Higgs to diphoton. Now here in the standard model we have 2 contributions. The W loop is the dominant one, and then the top loop cancels against this dominant W loop. So in the standard model we have the W loop, CV is 1 in the standard model, and then there's the contribution from the top, again proportional to the Yukawa, but then since it's a dimension 5 operator, this will be 1, and the 2 cancels against each other. Now we have more states running in the loop, so you have more contributions. You'll have the contribution from the T prime, the B prime, and the 4th generation lepton. And you see that the cancellation is now bigger because you have a W loop contribution minus the oh, this should be, yeah, that's 3 times the standard model. It just works out, these coefficients work out to a round number. So you have roughly sort of a 20% branching ratio at leading order. Now the next to leading order corrections are very important here because the Yukawas are becoming bigger and bigger the heavier the masses are. So if you include the next to leading order and also allow for the invisible decay width of Higgs goes to the 4th generation neutrino, you marginalize over this and you find out that the perturbative standard model with 4th generation is excluded at more than 5 sigma. So that's a non-trivial statement. So the standard model with 4th generation is excluded from the Higgs data. Okay, so the main part of this talk will be about the supersymmetry, so the minimal supersymmetric model. So we'll start with looking at the hierarchy problem. So what is this? So Higgs is a very special particle in the structure of the particles that we discovered. As we saw experimentally already know that it's a scalar. Well, that's a very distinct property. There's no other scalar in the standard model that we have discovered. So, and what this implies is that there's a hierarchy problem. Why? Well, you can take phi dagger phi, which is now a gate singlet, and this is a dimension 2 operator. So there is a mass parameter here which sits in the potential, the mu squared, so this is a dimensionful parameter. And the question really is, the size of this parameter is around 100 GeV. However, we have these higher scales that we know of, like the quantum gravity could sit at the 10 to the 19 GeV. And the question is, why is this thing so much smaller than the UV cutoff of our theory? Now, the way you can think about this is if you look at the self-energy diagram of the Higgs with the standard model fermion, let's say a top running in the loop, and you impose a hard cutoff on the loop, you see that this is quadratically divergent, right? This is a dimensionful, it's a super-normalizable operator, so there's a possibility of having a lambda UV squared in front. Now, if this lambda UV is large, meaning that there's a sensitivity to high scales, like the Planck scale, then what that means is that you need to cancel this one loop contribution against the bare term. And the cancellation has to be up to, let's say, this is really a cutoff is at 10 to the 19 GeV, then the cancellation is it's into 33 orders of magnitude. So you would have to fine-tune very finely your parameters in the Lagrangian in order to observe the value of the mu squared which you see in nature. So the real question is, why is the Wick scale so much smaller than the Planck scale? Now there's 2 types of solutions. The first one is that you have extra stuff running in the loop which cancel this contribution. So that's what happens in SUSY, in supersymmetry. And we look at the particular incarnation of supersymmetry, the minimal supersymmetric standard model. Now the other option is that the Higgs is composite, so there are some strong interactions which come not far above the electroweak scale, so that the Higgs is not really an elementary scalar, where it's just a composite of 2 fermions. And once you probe higher scales, you will be able to resolve this, that it's not the elementary particle. So we'll start with this first solution, the supersymmetry. Now, let's review how this works. So we have this contribution to the mass of the Higgs from the standard model fermions. It's quadratically divergent, and it's proportional to the Yukawa. So the fermions which couple more strongly to the Higgs will give a bigger contribution. Therefore, the biggest contribution is coming from the top. Now, let's say you have a scalar, another scalar in the theory, which couples with the quartic lambda s. Then you will have diagrams which would look like this, and the diagrams which look like that with the scalar running in the loop. And the total contribution to mu squared will now be lambda s, but with the opposite sign. So there's a minus sign here. Why? Because you have now instead of a fermion, you have a scalar running in the loop. So there's a minus sign there. It's still quadratically divergent. Now, if this lambda s is exactly right, you would cancel the quadratic divergence. So that's where the symmetry comes from. Right? The symmetry will fix the value of this quartic term, and supersymmetry does exactly that for you. So the lambda s will be the Yukawa squared. So what we will do is you'll have two scalars per Dirac fermion, and this will cancel the quadratic divergence. So once again, so the way this was solved is you had to have the right number of degrees of freedom running in the loop. They had to have the opposite, there had to be scalars instead of the fermions, and the couplings would also have to be fixed by the symmetry. Okay? Now there's also other benefits. For instance, in MSSM, you will have a dark matter candidate, which will be the lightest supersymmetric particle. You also have a modified running of the coupling constant. So this is the log of the Decadal log of the energy. The three coupling constants, actually the inverse of the coupling constants. This would be the standard model running of the three constants. They would not meet at the point. So if you want to have unification, you have to have extra stuff there. And this extra stuff can come from these supersymmetric particles which modify the running. And voila, they meet at the three lines meet at the point. Okay. Now, I need a little bit of formalism, so I'll do a crash course in supersymmetry. I don't really expect you to, it's either you already know it, or it will just be a recipe, but still maybe it's useful to know the words that I'll be using. So I don't think I'll be able to convey much more than that. Okay, so the crash course is supersymmetry. Now, it's really just a regular quantum field theory, but with extra symmetry. So there is a special field content. So for every fermionic degree of freedom, you will have a bosonic degree of freedom. So the number of degrees of freedom which are fermionic and bosonic will match. And then there's also relations between the interactions. So that you have relations between terms in the Lagrangian. For instance, in the MSSM, each standard model particle now has a supersymmetric partner. Now, if you have a Y fermion, for instance, if you have Majorana neutrinos, then you have one complex scalar. Let's say if you look at the right-handed U quark, then there's a squark, U squark, with the R here just to denote that it's a partner of the right-handed U quark. Or if you have a Dirac fermion, then you have two complex scalars. Like if you have a U quark, which has a right and the left-handed component, so in total there's 4 degrees of freedom, 4 real degrees of freedom, then you have two complex scalars, which means you have 4 real degrees of freedom. Okay. The other thing is a superpotential, so I'll be using superpotential. Now the nice formalism which keeps this structure of the supersymmetry, the fact that you have relations between different terms in the Lagrangian, is if you explicitly use supersymmetric language. So if you use, in this case, scalar superfields, so you will have a field which will contain both the bosonic and the fermionic degrees of freedom. So there is also a fermionic Grassmannian variable there. So you plug them into the same field, and then you write down something which is called the superpotential, a W, which is a function of this superfield. Now this is a very special function because you can only have a phi, these are left-handed fields, only phi but not phi dagger, so it's holomorphic. Now the way you get to a potential, there's a prescription of going from the superpotential to the supersymmetric potential. For instance, if you want to have scalar interactions, then this would be the recipe, right? Now, there's also non-holomorphic terms in the Lagrangian, so these will be called the D terms. Okay. Okay, I understand that this was really super quick, so it's more or less it's just the buzzwords, but since I'll be having the superpotential on the slides, it's either you know what it means, or at least you have a vague idea what the superpotential means. Okay? Now let's go to the minimal supersymmetric standard model. So you've probably all seen this picture before. So you take the standard model particles and you just multiply everything by a factor of 2. So now you have supersymmetric particles. Now, every time you see such a nice plot, you should be suspicious because it was done by a graphic designer, so there's probably something wrong with it. So in this case, of course, when you go to an MSSM, you also have to double the degrees of freedom in the Higgs sector. So instead of having just one Higgs, you need to have two Higgses, so the picture should look something like this. So you have an HU and HD. Okay, so now there's two ways of understanding why this has to happen. Okay, now the worst way is sort of a more formal. So you have a superpotential which is holomorphic. So we said this W is a holomorphic function. Now if you think about how the Yukawas work in the standard model, so you have one Higgs which couples both to the up right-handed quarks and the doublet, but also to the down quarks. But the way you can do this for both terms is because you use the complex conjugate, the charge conjugate on the Higgs. Right? In other words, the SU2, you use both the 2 and the 2 bar representations of the same field. So you have an HU, but here you have an HU dagger with the epsilon in there. Right? So that's the standard model. However, in the superpotential, I'm not allowed to put this term, the HU dagger. Therefore, I need to have two Higgses. Now, the other way of understanding that you need to have two Higgs doublets is because now you also have fermionic degrees of freedom. So you have fermions, the Higgsinos. Now, if you have two of these, two copies, this is now a vector-like representation because the hypercharges of these two guys are different. Right? So there will be no anomalies. You put in extra fermions, you need to make sure that there's no anomalies. So you see that you do need to have two Higgs doublets. That's the minimal choice. So in MSSM, we'll have two Higgs doublets. Okay, so let's look at this MSSM superpotential. These are the Yukawas. Now the bold letters, the YU are 3 by 3 matrices. So you see that the Yukawa interactions are supersymmetric. But then there's also this term which connects the HU and HD with the dimensional full parameter mu. So if we look at the Higgs mass term, just the supersymmetric part, then the Higgs mass term in the Lagrangian looks something like this. So there's a mu squared. Now there's more to the whole story, right? We know that the supersymmetry has to be broken. If supersymmetry were exact, then the superpartners would have exactly the same masses as the standard model fields. Now, obviously, this is not the case in nature. Right? We haven't observed supersymmetric particles. So that means that we need to break this symmetry. So we need to make these supersymmetric particles heavier. The way you do this is by introducing a soft supersymmetry breaking. So that means that we'll keep dimensionful coefficients, which in the infrared will be the relevant one. And in this way, we'll also not reintroduce the hierarchy problem. So now, this is really the most model-dependent part of the MSSM. So let me just flash you this soft Lagrangian in MSSM. So the first thing you see is that now there's many, many terms. Okay? Now let's look at a few of those. So on top of just having many terms, it's even worse. All these bold parameters are 3 by 3 matrices. So it's a compact form of very many terms. These A terms now mix the left and the right squarks. The tildes denote the squarks, so these are the scalars. Then you have the mass terms, which connect the same chirality squarks, so the squarks which are connected with the same chirality quarks. There's also a different notation which is commonly used. So this small b is sometimes called capital B mu, and sometimes these A terms people take out the standard model Yukawas, so you're left with these capital A's. Just that if you see this in other talks. Now, you really have now an explosion of parameters, right? So in general MSSM, if you have these matrices completely general, you would have 124 parameters. 45 of those will be CP violating phases. Now you should compare this with 19 parameters in the standard model. So you have an explosion of the parameters, and this explosion occurs because of the super SUSY breaking terms. So it's the SUSY breaking terms which are the complicated part of the MSSM. Okay, so luckily for us, we have an easier test. We want to look only at the Higgs sector. So the most important thing for us is that MSSM has 2 Higgs doublets. So let's do a little bit of counting. So we have 8 degrees of freedom. There's 2 Higgs doublets. They're complex. So there's 4 degrees of freedom per Higgs doublet. So total 8 degrees of freedom. 3 of those will be eaten by the longitudinal W and the Z once you have electroweak symmetry breaking. So we're left with 5 degrees of freedom. So we have 5 scalars. There's going to be 2 neutral CP even scalars, the small h and the capital H, and then 1 neutral CP odd state, which will denote by a capital A, and then there's charge Higgses, H plus and H minus. Okay, so now let's do the following. We'll take a simple limit. We'll take a limit where all SUSY particles are going to be heavy. So in the low energy, we'll only have these 2 scalar doublets. So what we're left with is a 2 Higgs doublet model. Now, this is not just your regular anything goes 2 Higgs doublet model. It's a special 2 Higgs doublet model of type 2. Why is it special? Because you only allow for these 2 terms in the potential. So the Yukawas, in the Yukawa terms, you couple HU only to the right-handed up quarks, but HD only couples to the right-handed down quarks. So there are no terms of wrong flavor. So the HD dagger does not couple to the right-handed up quarks. So these 2 terms are set to 0. You only have in the potential the first 2 terms. Now in the spectrum, as I said, there's scalars H, small h, capital H, pseudoscalar A, and charge Higgs H plus minus. Okay, so now let's look at what the data tells us about the structure of this 2 Higgs doublet model of type 2. So the first thing we need to look at what are the couplings or the parametrization. Now there's two important parameters here. Alpha will be the mixing angle. So the mixing angle is the following. So if you look at this slide, so the HU and HD are the initial, the gauge eigenstates. Now, once you go into the mass basis will be rotated by some angle with respect to this initial basis where the Yukawas have a nice structure. So there's the angle alpha which rotates from one basis to the mass eigenstate basis. Now the wave also points in some direction, and the angle between the HU and the wave is beta. Right? So the tangent beta will now be VU over VD. Maybe I did it wrong. So the tangent beta is VU over VD. Now, the couplings to the W and the Z will now be modified. Right? The small h, just because of the rotation, the small h will have a coefficient which is proportional to sine beta minus alpha, while the capital H is cosine beta minus alpha. If you take a particular limit, which is the decoupling limit, the decoupling limit is such that this coefficient here will become 1, so beta minus alpha will be pi over half. So this means that the W and the Z only couple to one of the mass eigenstates. That's the decoupling limit. So you only couple the W and the Z only couple to one of these states. This will be the standard model like Higgs. Right? It will couple to the W and the ZZ. Furthermore, the small h in the limit will couple to fermions in exactly the same way as in the standard model. So this is the limit where you recover the standard model. Right? The masses of the other Higgses are then degenerate in this limit. The degeneracy is up to terms which are order v squared. So the electroweak symmetry breaking would break this degeneracy. Now let's look at the fit to the data. Now the fermions have these fermion Yukawas are changed by the following ratios. Now in the decoupling limit this will become 1, and as we said, the couplings to the gauge bosons are sine beta minus alpha. You do a global Higgs, the global fit to the Higgs data, and you find that there's a twofold solution. Now the problem here is that of course people are using different notations, so there's a Z2 option of what you define as alpha. So I took results from Greenstein Utariat where they use minus alpha. So this is minus alpha, and the dashed lines are the decoupling limits. So the dashed line is the decoupling limit, and you see that the green, which is the allowed data from the data allows for these two regions, you see that you're very close to the decoupling limit. There's a twofold solution, but one of them is really the regular decoupling limit. Now, in this case, these other Higgses can still be relatively large of a few hundred GeV. Okay. Now, there's also the sum rules. The sum rules tell us the following. So the first one we sort of hinted at is that the coupling to the standard model like Higgs and the heavy Higgs, the sum of the squares of these couplings will add up to 1. We have a sine and a cosine of the same difference of the angles. Now what that tells us that if, first of all, the coupling strength of the two Higgses separately is always smaller than the standard model one. So the best you can do is that one of these two Higgses will couple with the strength of the standard model, or less. Now, if you find the value for the coupling of the light Higgs to the W, then you already know the couplings of the heavy Higgs to the W. The closer you are to the standard model, the less this heavy guy couples to the gauge bosons. Now, there are similar sum rules for the fermions. Here,